Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
Welcome to another episode of Wings of Wisdom, the WoW podcast. For the first episode of season 2, we're very excited to welcome Associate Professor of Political Science and Director of the Ashbrook Scholar Program at Ashland University. Our guest today has a rich background in American political thought and political philosophy and brings a wealth of knowledge on topics ranging from the American founding to the progressive era. Our guest today is one of the gentlest souls and kindest people I've ever met. Without further ado, Dr. Burkett, welcome to the Wings of Wisdom podcast.
Hey, Noseen, thank you. Dr. Ben Seed, congratulations to you, and thanks for that kind introduction. I've never been called a gentle soul before, I don't think by anybody, but I'll take it.
Well, you are, sir.
Thank you.
You are.
Thanks. I'll try to live up to that in my life.
Yeah, I remember our first interaction. I think I told you this maybe. One of our coaches, or actually candidates to be a coach at the WCC, she listed you as one of her references, and I reached out to you, and you responded right away, and you were very respectful, very polite. I was like, oh wow, this is a great person to know.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Was that before you and I started hanging out together in the dark early morning?
Yeah. I
Right.
think back in 2021, I think.
Okay, all right. I think I remember that.
So let's start with your time at Ashland University as a student. What can you tell us about your experiences as an undergraduate student at AU and how they may have influenced your career path?
Yeah, well, we're going to go way back. So I graduated from high school in 1988, and I went to college right away at another institution, and I did not like college at all. I found it to be not a pleasant experience. And so I got married. Married my wife, who I dated in high school, and we started a family. And then I think it was 4 or 5 years later, I decided I was going to go back and try college again. And so I got lucky that there was a place called Ashland College at the time. I still have coffee mugs around my office that say Ashland College. That was just half an hour away from my hometown. And so I didn't have the benefit that a lot of students have of like being able to research and pick the place that they want to go to. And I didn't know why I was going, except I knew that I was tired of working in a factory, sort of pulling levers and pushing buttons. And so, but I got lucky because I came here and found great professors who cared about students. And I came as an undergrad. I came as a fine arts major and a history major. So I was
Wow.
I had a fine arts major. I got a fine arts degree with a concentration in painting and drawing, and had a great teacher. Charles Caldemeyer was my main teacher. He's retired now. But I was also a history student, and I just always loved history. So I took it because I thought it would be fun. And I had a great professor that taught history here too. He's long retired. And he was an interesting fellow. He got so worked up in class about what he was reading that occasionally he would end up throwing his book across the room, or he jumped out of a window. I was not there for that, but I've heard about it, so it's become legend. He jumped out of a window. He's like, I can't take this anymore. This is just too amazing. And he
I hope it was the first floor.
It was the first floor, but he still dislocated his shoulder when he jumped out.
No.
His name was Ferrone. Anyway, but I mean, it was a great experience as an undergrad, and I took great classes. Discussed Shakespeare with Russell Weaver, who was still teaching. I took a class on German philosophy with Bill Vaughn, who was here. I took a statistics class with Gordon Swain.
Oh, wow.
Who's still here. And so these guys are really going to feel old if they ever watch this. I had great professors and I loved the classes. But it wasn't until I was a junior, I think it was spring of my junior year, that back then there was no core. They had what was called interdisciplinary studies. And you basically just had to pick, I don't know, 6 or 7 classes off this list of things that were outside of your major. And I just randomly picked a class called Political Science 101 and said, oh, I'll give it a try. And I took it with a fellow named Peter Schramm, who he just passed away in 2015. I mean, it seems like just yesterday to me. But it was amazing, and it changed my life because of the way he taught. He loved to read out loud. He loved to have conversations. He didn't just lecture the whole time. And he raised these really challenging questions. And he challenged me in class because I thought I was pretty smart at the time. And he made it abundantly clear that I was not as smart as I thought I was. And he did that, and he did that to a lot of students because he knew it was for their good. If they wanted to really challenge themselves and get better at thinking about important questions, he knew that he had to sort of poke you a little bit to get you maybe a little fired up. And so he was really good at that. And I fell in love with that. And that way of teaching and that way of thinking. And one of the first things he did was he threw this big fat book in front of me by Plato called The Republic. And he said, Burkett, you think you're pretty smart. I want you to read this and tell me what it means. This is one of the most challenging books to understand in all of the Western sort of philosophical tradition. And
Wow.
But I really tried as a young sort of naive student thinking I could figure this out. And after about 3 weeks of reading through this, I think I came this close to actually losing my mind. And I went back and I said, look, all right, I do not know what is going on here. And he's like, good. Now we can start. Then we started meeting and having discussions about this book for the next year. And so
Wow.
that made me love not only Peter Schramm, but that approach to learning and thinking about difficult things. And so I always knew that it was just a matter of time before I went on to grad school, because from that moment forward, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach, and I wanted to have those same kinds of moments with undergraduate students for the rest of my life. So that's how I sort of ended up here.
And you're from the area you mentioned, not too far from Ashland, right?
Yeah. So I finished my undergraduate degree, and then I was working for a company. I ended up working for a company. I worked for them for 14 years. I had a job in the real world for a long time, which has helped me immensely to understand that the way things are in the university are not necessarily the way things are out there in the so-called real world. But that's helped to keep me grounded, I think. But I worked for this company for another 7 years, and then I was living in Knoxville, Tennessee at the time, in 2000 or so, or 2002, and Peter Schramm shows up in my house on his motorcycle out of the blue and said, "Hey, Burkett, I'm going to stay with you for a week." And I was like, "Okay, great. You can stay with me as long as you want." And
Wow.
yeah,
In Tennessee.
in the summers he would ride his motorcycle around the country. He'd just
Wow.
read a book and take a couple of books, and he'd ride to South Dakota and read a book and then ride back or whatever. He was kind of a free spirit like that. And then so he showed up and he said, "Burkett, I need to talk to your wife about something." And I thought, oh, what could this mean? What's he going to say? And so what he did was he ended up taking her out to dinner, and unbeknownst to me, he was trying to persuade her to let me go to grad school.
Oh, wow.
And it worked. So she gave me permission to do this, and God bless her. We packed up and we moved to Dallas, Texas for 4 years of grad school at the University of Dallas. And then there was right at the end of that, there was an opening here at Ashland, a 1-year opening, and I applied and got it, and that turned into a tenure track position. And
It's amazing. Wow.
I'm here. This is my 20th year here teaching. So
Wow. What a story. And by the way, for those who don't know, you were inducted into the Academic Hall of Fame as a student in 1997.
yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yes.
have that plaque right by the exit, I should say, of the library on the first floor.
Right. Yeah. I was not a very, I mean, I was a serious student. I tried to be serious because I was older and I was paying for my own college. So I was going to get everything I could out of my education.
Hmm.
Maybe this isn't the best advice to give, but, but it's true. I never really cared about my grades. And back then, I mean, now we check grades instantly. Back then, we didn't even get grades until maybe 3, 4 weeks after the semester ended, and they came in the mail. And they came in one of those things where you have to tear off this end and then tear off this end and tear the top off and
You got to
unfold.
be careful. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. And so I had a whole stack of these things that I had never opened until after I had graduated. And because I just figured if I wasn't doing well, somebody would tell me not to come back. Nobody said you can't come back, Burkett, so I just kept registering for.
It's working.
And then they said, Burkett, you can't sign up for any more classes. You're done. And so yeah, I think it was my art professor, Charles Caldemeyer, who I mentioned. I think he may have nominated me for the Academic Hall of Fame. And then I ended up in my senior year, I was valedictorian. And
That's amazing.
but again, I never checked any of that stuff. So again, maybe that's not the best advice to give to people.
But you did work hard.
I worked hard. Yeah, I mean, I had, like I said, the thing that I loved about Ashland College and still do is the quality of the teaching, the quality of the teachers
Mm.
who just really care about not just the students, but the things that they teach, and those two things come together. And you can just tell, right, when these professors get passionate about what they're doing. And so, but I was here to get as much as I could, like from the faculty, from the professors. That I wanted to learn how to think about stuff because I realized I'd always had a sort of curiosity and a hunger to know and to
Hmm.
get better about thinking about things and to know more. I was one of those sort of kids who was always getting in trouble because of my curiosity, you know. But but I was going to get everything. I was going to try to get all of my professors to help me as much as they could, right? I mean, and they did. A lot of them were so great, and
Hmm.
I'm still grateful to all of them for what they were able to do for me. But yeah, I was going to be serious. I mean, I was paying for it. It was my time, my money, and I was going to make sure that I was learning something in every class.
You get the most out of it.
Yeah, and I didn't do it for the grades. I mean, that was the thing.
Yeah, yeah. The grace came later, so you were more immersed in the experience. You were interested in knowing, learning, and growing.
Yeah, yeah,
And professors can see that potential, and I think that's what Dr. Schramm saw in you, making the trip all the way to Tennessee, which is impressive. How many people do that, right?
yeah. Well,
That's
you have to have a motorcycle first.
yeah.
You have to have a lot of free time.
That's incredible.
So yeah, but I mean, that was something my dad always taught me was, you don't think about the reward. You just,
Mm,
the reward always just follows hard work. So just
very good, yeah.
keep your nose to the grindstone. Just work hard, and good things always happen for people that work hard. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, that's just the way I've always been. Yeah, I
And
was
you mentioned, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
extraordinarily grateful for everything that Peter did, and he loved students, and it wasn't just me. He had a lot of great students that he loved, and would have done the same thing for. I'm sure he did the same thing for others.
So, were you an Ashbrook scholar
I was
back
not a
then?
National Scholar.
You were not. Okay.
No, I
How
could.
did that look back then compared to now?
It was much smaller. It was a much smaller program. Um, I don't know the exact numbers of Ashford scholars back then, but I would say there were probably about 50 or so, maybe a little bit more than that, 50 Ashford scholars. But see, I didn't find sort of political science until I was a junior. And by that point, it was kind of too late because Ashford
Hmm.
scholars all write a senior thesis, and they start writing as juniors. So for me, it was a little bit too late to become an Ashford scholar in a formal sort of way. So I just hung out with them as much as I could and went to the speaking events and hung out with the professors and as much as I could. But yeah, so no, I was a little bit too late to the show. But I'm fortunate to work now with some friends who were also Ashbrook scholars at the time, and I knew them as an undergrad. And I took a lot of classes with them.
Wow. So you kind of were, but not really formally, but still you were engaged in those experiences.
I don't know, what do you call somebody like that who just sort of tags along and isn't really invited to the party, but he just sort of shows up anyway and
And ask those, difficult questions.
lurks around in the background, what nobody notices. That was what I was.
Oh, that's funny. Um, and you mentioned your interest in history and later on political science. Now, as the director of the Ashbrook Scholar Program, what do you find most rewarding about working with students, especially in this role?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not great big things. Like, I mean, Ashbrook scholars have all sorts of great opportunities to meet interesting speakers, and they get to do all sorts of things now that even Ashbrook scholars back in the '90s didn't get to do. For me, it's the little moments.
Hmm.
I see them in class. Like all of the freshman Ashbrook scholars take Political Science 101 with either me or two other professors, Dr. McBrayer or Dr. Griffith, both of them. But it's those little sort of moments when we're discussing something or we're arguing over something in class or having a conversation, and I can just see somebody's eyes sort of light up or
Hmm.
get big for a second, and you realize, they're seeing something,
Hmm.
they're thinking about something maybe they haven't thought about before, and so they're making these sort of connections. And there's nothing more delightful to me than to see those minds start to sort of see things in a more capacious or more
Interesting.
detailed way or whatever it might be, right? That delight, because there's always that little sometimes you can just see it in somebody's eyes, right? When I never thought of that way, but there's also a little bit of pleasure and joy mixed in with that after the pain of having thought deeply about something, right? That little touch of joy, it makes it all sort of worthwhile. And Peter Schramm, I keep bringing Peter up, but Peter Schramm, when he would see that in class, he would actually sort of do a little skip, little kid like but I do the skipping inside. I don't actually physically skip in class, but just to see young minds who are good minds and
Hmm.
you know in their own right, but to see them make larger connections about things that will hopefully help them later in life find what it is they love to do and allow them to be happier, live more fulfilling lives. That's the best thing about what we do.
Very good. Um, do you have any special plans for the program in the future? Are there any aspirations to grow the program than what it is
Well,
now?
I don't know about that so much. I mean, it's always a question of we're always trying to rethink what we do because we know things change, and we always have to be open to changing along with the times. And of course,
Hmm.
this COVID changed a lot of things. But we're always open to new ideas about how we can provide greater opportunities for students to get the most out of their college experience and their college education. When we um, find donors or funding that are people that are willing to help us do those sorts of things, we always will make the most out of that. But one of my favorite things that Ashbrook scholars get to do now that we didn't do back in the '90s, we've only done it for the last few years, is at the end of their freshman year they go on what we call a freedom tour,
Hmm.
and it's a week. It's essentially a week-long tour. We get on a bus and they go to Philadelphia, historic Philadelphia, and they get to see where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were written. And then we'll go to D.C., Washington D.C., and take a look at that mess. And no, I'm just kidding. Oh, that's stuff. City of confusion. No, but spend a day or two in D.C., and then we'll go to Gettysburg on the way back, visit the battlefield at Gettysburg, and so it's a really great trip, and it helps to bring a lot of the stuff that they'll study in some of their history classes as freshmen.
Hmm.
It helps put a point, like a punctuation point on some of that stuff to be able to see where um, excuse me, to see where James Madison and 54 other individuals drafted a constitution in 1787, or to go see where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his speech, I Have a Dream,
Wow.
on the footsteps of the Lincoln Memorial, and to see the battlefield at Gettysburg, where it was a 3-day battle, but that was the bloodiest 3-day. It was the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. So just to see, for them to see, not just sort of from a historically, what do you call that? Just from a sort of old, sterile, historical standpoint, but to actually see where people have made sacrifices for their country and for their fellow citizens and for the good of mankind, I think that really, hopefully, inspires them. It does for me every time.
Right. It's firsthand experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of the people we study a lot of people in our classes and a lot of the other things that we do because they're great thinkers.
Right.
But a lot of them they made massive sacrifices for the for the sake of progress, or for the sake of bringing about greater and greater equality or freedom for more and more people, right? I mean, people gave a lot of their lives to be able to do these great things. And they might get sort of lasting glory out of it, but a lot of them died broke and
Right.
miserable in some way. So, but I suspect they also died happy, knowing that they did what they could for their country.
Sure. Yeah. A lot of sacrifices and commitments, and you feel disconnected if you learn about these figures just from books or by yourself. But when you're engaged in conversations on the ground, the actual physical ground where some of these things happened, I think it makes a huge difference for sure.
Yeah, it's hard. Like if you go to, I don't know if you've been to the battlefield at Gettysburg. I've been there. I don't know how many times, but it's for me.
Each time it's
yeah, right?
it's new, right?
It's new, but for me, it's impossible. As soon as I even get close to the battlefield, or I see the first or the first day took place, it's impossible for me to not start weeping a little bit. I mean, I cry.
Wow.
I'm so moved by these things. And you think about the thousands of people that died or were injured at this battle over 3 days. It's just remarkable to think about people having the courage to do those sorts of things for the cause they believed in.
That's for sure. That's passion. Um, and in your work, you cover a range of topics in American political thought. How do you select and approach these subjects, the subjects that you teach, and what drives that passion for these areas for you?
Well, yeah, that's a tough one to do because there's so much, right? And you want to do as much as you can, but then you only have 15, 16 weeks to do it in.
Right.
So, in our department, we have 2 courses on American political thought. There's part 1 and part 2, and part 1 covers sort of the American founding up to around the end of the Civil War. And I have a colleague who teaches that usually. I teach the second part of that, and that starts right around the Progressive era, so around 80s, and then we'll see how far we get, right? Sometimes we get to the 90s, and sometimes we get
Right.
closer to Trump's presidency. But what I like to do is show, we're looking at American political thought. One of the things I hope students see is that political ideas don't just pop up out of the blue. There's often a kind of cause and effect in terms of the way people are. So the way we are today politically, we've got liberals and conservatives. Well, one of the things I want them to see is, well, where did conservatism come from, and where did liberalism come from? It's been around. Those ideas that inform those 2 political views have been around for at least 100 and some years, like going back to the 1880s. So one of the things when I pick what I want to talk about, what I'm trying to do in that course is show how did we end up where we are today, right? So where are sort of the origins? Where do we see the beginnings of ideas that inform conservatism or liberalism? And I think we really do need to go to the 1880s to see that, because the 1880s in America was a time of great turmoil and upheaval, and change, and the economic changes are pretty drastic. You've got
Hmm.
the Industrial Revolution changing the way people live. Americans are facing all sorts of um, problems that they hadn't faced before.
Hmm.
Like, with the rise of big cities, people didn't know how to deal with like urban overcrowding and lack of education and
Diseases,
conditions and diseases and
unemployment. Yeah.
gangs, all these sorts of things. So, in an effort to deal with these new problems, there's around the 1880s, 1890s, there's a real effort to rethink like
Hmm.
how people should live as Americans and what the role of government is in these sorts of things, right? And so one of the things I also try to show in my American political thought class is that throughout most of the 20th century, there's a kind of dialogue taking place among Americans over whether we need to change entirely to new ways of thinking, or can we maintain some of the old ideas that have carried over from the, say, American founding, right?
Hmm.
So do we still believe all men are created equal, but also individually free, or do we have to readjust those things? So I just try to show like how there's a kind of continuity of thought that starts to grow out of that era, that sort of makes us who we are today in some very broad way.
Yeah, very good. I like how you cover how these historical periods influencing contemporary American politics
Right.
and the emergence of those ideas over time and how they developed and how they are again affecting our lives today. I know you also teach first year seminar.
Yeah. I'm teaching one this semester, just starting.
What can you tell us about, I don't know, your favorite part of that class?
Well, again, it's very similar to what I was saying earlier. I love those moments when students who might think that. So what? Okay, let me back up. So what we do in the FYS classes is it's all grounded in reading a common text, and this semester the common text is Frederick Douglass's narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, full title, written by himself, I should say, right? An American
Right.
slave, written by himself.
And this is the second time that we're covering that book, right?
Second time, yeah, I taught it
Yeah.
last semester, and first, I think some students might think to themselves, "Well, why are we reading a book?" Well, because college is about learning how to think. You have your classes where you're learning how to think about your major, and you have your classes where you're learning how to think better about the things that will make you successful in your career, and so all these different things. But I believe that it's important for each of us to engage in a kind of thinking in a way that maybe isn't related to your career or to your profession down the
Hmm.
road. Maybe it's important to think about things that just make you a better human being, or maybe will help you be better at navigating the challenges of life that you might face as a parent or um, a neighbor or a citizen, right? And so one of the things that I love about reading this text in particular is that it provides the story of Fred Douglass, who was raised a slave and yet discovered the path to freedom on his own, and teaches us about the importance not only of fighting for your freedom and maintaining your freedom, but also how do you get there? And it turns out the path to freedom for Frederick Douglass is education. And one of the most valuable things to him, Fred Douglass, a former slave, was learning how to read, being able to read a book. For him, that was the basis of freedom. That's the most basic freedom that he could engage in. All the other freedoms that he enjoyed are really sort of grounded on his ability to read and think. And so what I love about these classes is sometimes students it'll take maybe a little while for some, but they'll come around and they'll say, oh, well, I can actually do this. This is pretty interesting. This guy's kind of an interesting guy, right? And if they can start to see, first of all, that they can do this in a serious way, and then secondly, see how it relates to their life. Again, nothing better in my book than to see that happen.
Absolutely, yeah. Making those connections again.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, reading a complex text, it doesn't come easy to a lot of our students, but it's a skill that we all need as academics or as, scholars in academia.
Yeah, and it's a skill. You said it exactly right. It's a skill, and it's just like any other skill, it takes practice. You have to get good at it. I mean, I was fortunate. I had some great teachers again that showed me a little bit at a time. Like I started to realize, oh, there's a right way to read these texts. Like sometimes an author will say something on the surface, but they'll really want you to sort of piece together a kind of deeper meaning, right? So in my opinion, some of the greatest authors don't really say everything they're thinking.
Right.
They leave a lot of it to the reader to use their minds to sort of piece together and figure out. And that's what makes it interesting to me. So if they can see that they can actually do that, it should be deeply rewarding to them, I would hope. Because again, but it's a skill. You just have to learn how to do it over time. Where just like, if you're an athlete, you get better at baseball by practicing. You get better at volleyball by practicing, whatever it is, right?
Right. Yeah.
Except for me, I've been trying to get better at running, and I'm trying to do more of it, and I'm just not getting any better at it. But we'll leave that aside.
Yeah. Time will come. Time will come.
Maybe
You're an example, role model for all of us. So
wow.
you do, you're you're working out every single day. I think that's impressive. Just the fact that you wake up early in the morning and you're out there doing things maybe with other people or by yourself, but you're always doing something, and that's commitment.
Well, I have fun doing it. So
Yeah.
it's always fun to do it with other good people. That's the key. So
And
and you.
yeah, thank you.
You're the best, man.
You mentioned that you majored in art, right? Was it painting or art,
Yeah,
art and
fine art.
painting or
Yeah,
yeah,
concentration in painting.
painting. Oh, so that was your concentration. Okay. So how do you incorporate your interest in painting and art into your work as a history and political science professor, if at all?
That's great. Well, I mean, I can pull from my knowledge of art history occasionally to show an image and to make a point, to make a connection. I don't do that very often. I probably should do more of that, but I have done presentations in the summer. Teach in these academies that the Ashbrook Center puts on for high school students. One of the academies is called Teaching America's Story, and we start with the American founding, and then we go to the Civil War, and we end with the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. And in those academies in the summer, I have put together like a slideshow called The Art and Architecture of Liberty. And so I draw on a lot of art, like famous paintings, and then a lot of American architecture, public architecture, in this presentation to show where these sort of fundamental American ideas of self-government, individual liberty, even things like, executive power, the influences of Roman republicanism, for example, where these things reveal themselves in American art and architecture. And so that's a lot of fun. I love doing that presentation. Like even a lot of the art you'll find around the time of the American founding. So as you know, the Declaration of Independence starts with the claim in the second paragraph that all men are created equal.
Right.
And that the belief in that fundamentally makes American society from that point forward different than, say, old world aristocratic societies, where the assumption is all men are not equal, right? You have aristocrats and you have different levels of nobility, and then you have commoners. And in those old world aristocracies, based on that kind of legal inequality, most of the artwork was of aristocratic families, right? They were the ones with money. Artists were making money off painting these families. But what you find in America, once we say all men are created equal, what that means is, hey, you know what? Joe Smith down the road who makes horseshoes, he's just as equal in some ways as everybody else. And so what you find in America is starting around the 17 to 1800s, is American artists are starting to paint more and more about like the common man, so-called common man, like ordinary life of ordinary citizens all of a sudden takes on a new importance. And so you have these great paintings of people, like families getting together for holidays and things like that. All the stuff we we like to do. Not to say that they didn't do that in other parts of the world, but most of the art, a lot of the art at that time would have reflected what aristocratic families did, while the rest of the world
Right.
went out and worked to be able to, to support these aristocrats in their less than industrious lifestyles. I'm not being very fair to aristocrats here, I know, but no, but now all of a sudden family like became important. And so the
Hmm.
aristocratic paintings of the 18th and 17th century, they were patriarchal. It was a patriarchal system, right? The father was the head of everything. So in a lot of those paintings, what you find is the father is at the center of the painting. He's always the largest figure, the tallest figure. And then the wife is off to the side, and then the little kids are running around if they're, if they're even in the painting, doing their own thing. But when you look at American paintings in the 1700s, 1800s, what you find is the shift has moved to the mother being the center of the family, the
Hmm.
center of the painting. So women and mothers especially play a much more prominent
Interesting.
role in paintings of families in America. So I like making those connections and showing how these American ideas affected art.
Wow.
And I think that's a lot of fun.
That's so cool. I think it would be so cool if students could see you in action. I know like you have some type of program, right, where you can actually draw using a tablet, right?
Yeah,
If that's displayed on a screen and
we
you
could do that. Yeah, I do have some of that software. I stopped painting. I just ran out of time. There's so much to do, right? See, I painted a little bit in grad school. That would have been 2002. But then I don't think I had painted until maybe 2016 or 2017. So I didn't do any
wow.
art for a long time. It's just because I don't have much free time, right? And
Right, 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 right.
because my kids are all grown up now, moved out. I have three daughters. They're all moved out and have kids of their own. So once they moved out, I had a little bit of extra free time, and I started painting again around 2016 or 2017. Started drawing and painting again. So I can still do a little bit of it.
Are you working on a piece right now? Like painting? I
Um,
know you do some drawing, but
yeah,
I know
it was.
painting is more time consuming, right?
It is. Yeah, and the problem with me is, I still love painting. I love reading and thinking and talking with students and teaching and all that. But I still love painting. But the problem with painting is it's a solitary thing for me, and I have to be alone. And then once I start, it's hard for me to stop because you have to remember where you're at.
Right, 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 right.
And so just I don't start painting because I know I'm going to have to stop. And I'd rather at this point in my life I like spending time with people more and then being alone. So, but I've got maybe 4 or 5 paintings in my studio at home. I have a little art studio. I have a little room in my basement. When my youngest daughter moved out, I took her bedroom and I converted half of it as a weight room and the other half as a painting studio. I've got maybe 5 unfinished paintings sitting in there, and
Really? Okay.
some drawings I started that I haven't finished. But I'll get around to it maybe soon.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. That's great.
It's still
Very
fun.
good. Yeah. Yeah. Earlier you mentioned COVID, and now we're dealing with the emergence of artificial intelligence tools. What changes do you foresee for the future in higher education?
Well, I think AI is a challenge. I really do, and know it has its uses. And I know there are people that think that as long as you just use it as a tool
Hmm.
to help you get better at writing, then that could be useful. But my concern is that AI is so easy to use and so hard to detect, although it is detectable to a careful reader, I think, a lot of the time anyway. But my fear is that it will become will it will take away from students an opportunity to do something that's hard and therefore good for them. And I think it's good for students to have to learn how to write on their own carefully.
Hmm.
Why? Because I think, writing is just a form of speaking in a way, and speaking is just a form of thinking. So writing is just a form of thinking. And if you can't write well, or you let an AI program write for you, then you're also letting it think for you. And
Hmm.
to me, that's a waste of what your mind is is here to do. We're all given minds that are capable of thinking. It's just a matter of how much time and effort you want to put into it. And like anything else, I mean, can you imagine I mean, maybe we're not that far down the road where we're going to create somehow technology that allows us to train for Olympic sports without having to put the effort in. I don't know. You know, they build this chamber and you put your body in it, and then inside you're just laying there sleeping for hours, and it's training your body to pole vault or something. I mean, that's a little
possible. Yeah, you never know.
A little science fiction-y, but would anybody? And then so let's say somebody did that, and then they went off and they earned a gold medal at the Olympics in pole vaulting. Did they really earn it?
Mm.
Did they really deserve to have their name, forever up there as a gold medalist in the Olympics? I mean, I don't know. Again, this is getting kind of weird now.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing when it comes to writing. If you don't write the thing that you're turning in, or if it's not entirely the work of your own mind, you shouldn't take credit for it because it's not yours. You shouldn't get, and so not only should you not get any credit for it, but it's just bad. It's just bad for you.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is because I know the Ashbrook Scholar program focuses a lot on oral as well as written skills.
Yes.
So those things that any Ashbrook Scholar should have or should be working on improving on a daily basis. Is that still a focus for Ashbrook?
It is, yeah. That's why we require Ashbrook scholars to do a senior thesis. It's called a statesmanship thesis, and it's partly a written work, right? It's about 50 or 60 pages of written work exploring a question of interest. And then they also have to defend it publicly in about an hour defense. And so it combines that writing, that's thinking, writing, and speaking component to it.
Interesting.
We also do every semester we have what's called the Henry Clay speech competition, where Ashbrook scholars are given a topic or some topics to choose from, and they have to give they have to write a 5-minute speech. And this semester they have to write a persuasive political speech to try to persuade somebody of a point of view. And then we also do an essay writing competition every semester, about 1,000-word essay. And we have in the past been fortunate to get he's retired now, the former editor of the Cleveland Plain Dealer to come down and spend a day with students to help them, revise their essays and rewrite their essays.
Wonderful.
So, but again, yeah, we really do think that there's a connection between thinking, speaking, and writing. And the better you are at one, the better you get at the other two. You should anyway with practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and these contests, students are supposed to participate in those at least once, right? During their time as Ashbrook scholars. Okay. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And you're preparing them for what's coming next after they graduate.
Yeah. And what's coming next? Who knows? I don't know what's coming next. Jobs, grad school, whatever it might be.
Yeah, grad school. Yeah, but still, you have to be prepared to share, to express yourself clearly, effectively, communicate in a way that people will listen, be able to interact. All of these are important skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's well documented that employers, the thing that they're looking for most are people who can think well and speak well and write well and listen well.
Yeah, and that's communication. Exactly. Yeah. And
I mean, if you can demonstrate that you're good at those sorts of things, then in a lot of businesses out there, they can train you to do the particular thing that they want you to do. But at a certain point in life, it gets harder to teach somebody how to listen and speak, right? So, but those are skills we learn mainly in high school and college. So a lot of students, they go off. A lot of Ashbrook scholars go off and they get good jobs in all these different fields. And I always say I'm not training anybody for any particular job. I mean, I teach political science, but I'm not teaching people specifically to go out and get into politics. I'm trying to help people sort of master those skills, as you call them, right? And as I would call them. master those skills that are going to be allow them to be successful in every aspect of life, professionally and in private.
Right.
Able to
Right.
communicate well in thoughtful ways with your friends, with people at your church, or people at your gym, whatever. Right? Those the better you are at those things, you tend to be happier. I think.
Absolutely. No. And since you mentioned this holistic perspective, how do you balance your academic responsibilities as professor and director of the Ashbrook Scholar Program with your personal interests and hobbies, and what role does each play in your life? That interplay of all the pieces.
Yeah. Well, right now, my hobbies include working out most of the time. That's my main hobby. And I do it. I do that primarily. I mean, do it for two reasons. I get to hang out with good dudes like you most of the time when I do this, right? And but I think it's also made me a better teacher. I think
Hmm.
it's helped me to do my job better, right? Because I feel like I have more energy and my mind is better. My mind is more focused and clear than I think it's ever been. Still not that great, but I mean it's better. So yeah, definitely. Yeah,
You're too humble.
my sense of humor has not gotten better, obviously. But I mean, I enjoy doing that because I feel like I have more energy to devote to the things that I really love doing. So in my personal life, now that my children are all grown on their own, really with the time that I have sort of left over is mostly spent watching my grandchildren play sports. They play football, soccer. They do all this sort of, they do these things. So I'm fortunate that I get some time to be able to see them
Very good.
grow up, which is probably the most precious thing in my private life. I'll be honest. When my children were younger, I didn't see them much. I was always busy working or studying. I had two daughters when I was an undergraduate student, and I was working 50 hours a week at a full time job, and then going full time to classes and traveling,
Wow.
reading. So I missed a lot of their childhood, their childhoods when they were growing up. So I'm really in a fortunate place to have good colleagues, good friends, good students, and a little bit of time to be able to see my grandchildren
That's wonderful.
grow up and be kids. So yeah, I'm really
That's
blessed.
that's a big blessing. Yeah.
So yeah, and then you and I really started meeting. We really got to know each other 2-3 years ago, right?
Right.
We
Right.
started working out, and
Yeah. If you
fortunate.
wanna give a shout out to F3, you're more than welcome to use the platform.
Yeah,
If you
we have
if
pretty
you wanna
blessed.
invite other people.
Well, but I mean, what I was going to say there was, I mean, I'm fortunate to have such good friends, not just colleagues, but friends who really look out for each other, and that was something that I think was missing in my life earlier
Hmm.
because I spent so much time focused on work, so to speak.
It's easy to get so immersed in one thing.
It is, yeah, and you don't realize. I mean, maybe when I was younger, a lot of young people like that.
Hmm.
When you're young, you're tough. You can think you can handle everything on your own, and when you hit a certain age, you start to realize, oh man, I need people.
Yeah, we're not as invincible as we
Oh,
might think, right?
right.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all really
Yeah.
good.
So, well, Chris, we always finish with this question. Um, what advice do you have for our students, especially those who are at the start of their academic journey as college students?
Yeah, that's great. I'm gonna give a little bit of a counterintuitive advice, I guess, because I just listened to a podcast not long ago about the problem of what they call, I think it's called commencement talk or something like that, where what people usually say is, pursue your dreams, like you can do anything, follow it, shoot for the stars and
Mm,
shoot for whatever it is, right? Shoot for the
right.
sky and do all these great big things. What I'm going to suggest is focus on the little things. Just do your job. Do like every class, you have a job to do, right?
Mm, right.
You have to read this. Maybe you have to write this. Don't overlook everybody. young people especially, they want to do great things, and that's admirable, right? They're young and they want to make something of themselves. That's great, and they want to change the world and all these sorts of things. But don't neglect the little things around you.
Hmm.
Take care of the little things, and the big things will follow. Good things, as I said earlier, good things always come to those who work hard and take care of the details. And as you're working hard to make your life better, to promote your life through your college education, don't forget to look around for those opportunities when your friends might need your help. I mean, sometimes we get so focused on ourselves and trying to do the big things with our lives that we forget to just look around at the person next to us
Hmm.
and ask yourself, what might this person need from me today, and what can I do for them? So, not saying you have to don't neglect yourself entirely, but don't forget you're part of a larger world.
Right.
Anyway, I
Right.
don't know if that was coherent or not, but
Yeah, and you
so,
mentioned the little things, so that would be what? Maybe getting enough sleep,
yeah, right.
taking care of your family,
Comb your
staying in
hair,
touch with your siblings,
brush your
right?
teeth,
Yeah, brush your teeth. There you go.
and show up to class on time.
Yeah.
I mean, little things. You can't do the big things without doing the little things right. I
Hmm.
had a great
Right.
when I worked for this company. I worked for this company for 14 years, and it was privately owned, and the owner of the company he was like a second dad to me. He was a great guy. He always said the same thing: you can't do the big things well if you can't do the little things right. So,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. The
and then
big
the
things
big
happen
things,
after, right?
yep, they'll come. Just be
They'll come.
patient.
Wonderful.
All right,
Well, thank you so much. I just want to thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with us, and we're very grateful for you and for all of your contributions to the Ashbrook program, and also to you and the whole Ashland community. Love you, Dr. Burkett, and we're happy that you're here with us.
right back at you, buddy. Right back
Yeah.
at
Yeah. Thanks a
you.
lot.
Appreciate it. Yeah, always a
Yeah.
pleasure, most.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you.
take care.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.